Hello everybody and welcome to this video on emotional literacy in schools. This is the second of 2 units from Unit 1 of ELSA training. My name is Nikki Hodges and I'm an educational psychologist working with Psychology for Schools, a collaborative of 4 educational psychologists based in the east of England. So there are 3 main aims for this video. The first one is to think about what emotional literacy is. The second is to consider the importance of emotional literacy for young people. And the third is to think about the school's role in developing children's emotional literacy. So sometimes we hear staff in school say things like, "We're not social workers, our job is to teach." But life isn't really like this. It doesn't separate out into nice, neat little parcels. And research shows that emotions affect a wide range of areas of children's life. So it affects their attention, memory and learning, decision-making, creativity, mental and physical well-being, and also their ability to form and maintain healthy relationships. Children thrive in schools that care for the whole child, and schools have an important role to play in developing well-balanced children. And we need to be as clear about how we develop their emotional skills as we are about how we teach literacy and numeracy and other academic subjects. So in this video, we're having a very quick introduction to some of the psychological foundations that underpin the ELSA programme. So we're going to be looking at some areas of psychology which contribute to our understanding of emotional literacy. The first one we're going to look at is Maslow's theory of self-actualization, often referred to as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And to use a gardening analogy, this might be described as a process of blossoming. We're also going to have a look at some ideas around self-concept and self-esteem, and a researcher called Bandura did a lot of work in this area. We're then going to think about the research in emotional intelligence, and this research was originally done by Salovey and Mayer, but was popularised by Daniel Goleman. And then finally we're going to very briefly look at Mark Brackett's framework for understanding emotions, which he names the ruler framework. So let's start by looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow suggested a 5-stage hierarchy of needs, and he thought somebody's higher needs could only be met if the lower ones had been met first. There's a bit of a debate about whether he's right, but whatever, it still remains a really useful model. So at the lower level, everyone needs food and drink, warmth, shelter, and sleep to function effectively. Not having these things can affect a child's behaviour and learning, and these are physiological needs. The next level of need is for safety. So ideally, children need a safe and secure environment in the home, the classroom, and the playground. And as long as they feel safe somewhere, they can generally cope. However, their personal development can stall if they feel unsafe. And so this isn't just about physical safety. Verbal bullying, for example, can undermine a child's sense of safety. And then after safety comes the need for a sense of belonging. And this arises out of being loved and valued within the family and from the enjoyment of friendships beyond the family. Now, some children feel unloved at home and isolated at school, and this too is going to hinder their development. The next level is esteem, and esteem needs are about achievement, status, reputation, and responsibility. So basically, everyone needs to be able to feel good about themselves and to receive recognition, attention, and appreciation. And lastly, in Maslow's hierarchy comes self-actualization, or personal growth and fulfillment. And this is about having opportunities to develop our inner talents and abilities. So all children and adults should have the chance to experiment with their own ideas and to try out a range of activities. And poor self-esteem undermines the courage to experiment and develop potential. So this chart shows the same information in a way that makes it slightly easier to think about in a school context. And it's useful to think about what schools can do to support children who might not be getting what they need at any of these lower steps. So I just want you to take a moment and I want you to think about a child you know well whose needs are not being well met at one of the lower levels. So maybe their physical needs aren't being met. Maybe they don't have breakfast before they come into school in the morning. Maybe they don't feel safe, and that might be because of what's going on at home, or maybe they're being bullied at school. Maybe they don't feel as if they belong because they don't have any friends. Or maybe they just don't feel good about themselves. Keep that child in mind because you're going to have to come back to that child in your homework task. Next, we're going to look at Bandura's theory of self-concept. So a person's self-concept is the knowledge they have about themselves, their self-identity. And lots of different components contribute to people's self-concept. For example, people have views about their physical aspects. So this relates to what we look like, so height, weight, gender, race, etc. But it also relates to physical things about us, such as the possessions we have, the home we live in, the clothes we wear. People also have views about how academic they are, and this relates to how well we do in school or how well we learn. People have ideas about their social lives, so people will have an understanding or a view about how well they relate to other people, whether we consider ourselves friendly, a loner, or a leader. People will have their own ideas about religious beliefs or political beliefs, and around what their nationality means to them. So let's think about how self-concept develops. We develop and maintain our self-concept through a process of taking action and then reflecting on what we've done, and also by others giving us feedback. So a child reflects on what they've done by thinking about whether they've been successful or unsuccessful. Personal accomplishments are really important in developing self-concept. Achieving a goal helps children to develop their self-efficacy, that is, their belief that they can be successful if they try. So that idea of nothing breeds success like success. And making sure that children can master the basics of reading and writing at school is likely to promote a positive self-concept and lead them to feel motivated to tackle harder academic tasks. Failure, on the other hand, can lead to a belief that they are likely not to be successful in the future and a reluctance to try new things. The children can also get feedback from their bodies. So bodily awareness is needed in order to be aware of our emotional states. And some children are very poor at recognizing or understanding the changes in their bodies due to different emotions. And this is often a really good starting place for raising emotional awareness. The children also get feedback about themselves and their place in the world from those around them. And that feedback, as we said, can be verbal or non-verbal. Verbal feedback, it can be a very powerful way for children to develop beliefs about themselves. So praise and encouragement can stimulate accomplishment. But indiscriminate praise is really unhelpful. It needs to be genuine or children will see through it. And it's also to be important to be aware of hidden messages. So praising achievements can lead to fixed mindset thinking, which can undermine motivation. So self-esteem is different to self-concept. Self-concept is the ideas you have about yourself, and it doesn't really involve evaluation. However, self-esteem involves evaluating yourself in relation to the outside world. It's the gap between where you want to be and where you think you are. For example, Khalid finds maths difficult and is acutely aware of the gap between himself and his peers. He often talks about the fact that he is no good at maths and others are better than him. He has low self-esteem with regard to his numeracy skills. Zeph, on the other hand, also finds maths hard. However, he doesn't really mind. He continues to try hard and will always have a go at tasks, even if they're difficult. He doesn't compare himself to others. Zeph does not have low self-esteem with regard to maths. A sense of positive self-esteem is seen as essential for mental, emotional and social health, and Units 2 and 3 of ELSA will look at developing self-esteem in more details. So positive self-esteem is very important for successful learning. Gordon and Grant in 1997 found that 1 in 10 pupils viewed themselves as useless or a failure. Children who view themselves in this way are unlikely to be motivated or to be resilient in the face of difficulties. They may believe there's no point trying because they are unlikely to be successful. Children thrive when they have people who provide a warm and approving foundation from which to venture into the world. Essentially, this is about being loved unconditionally. And some children, due to difficulties in their home lives, may not have this experience. Positive and supportive attuned relationships with key adults in school can be very important in helping these children to develop the sense of security and positive self-esteem. So let's now think about what emotional intelligence is. So the idea of emotional intelligence was made popular by someone called Daniel Goleman at the end of the last century. And he said there were 2 parts within emotional intelligence. So the first area is how we manage ourselves. So that includes how aware we are of our own feelings, thoughts, patterns and behaviours, whether we are able to manage these aspects of our life or whether we are just overcome by them, and how motivated we are to learn from our experience and to change unhelpful patterns of feeling, thinking and behaviours into more positive ones. And the second aspect that he considered as part of emotional intelligence was how we manage our interactions with others. So can we put ourselves in other people's shoes? Are we willing and able to adapt our behaviours to take account of other people's feelings and attitudes? And next, I want to introduce you to a very helpful framework that you can use to think about all the skills involved in managing emotions. And it was developed by Mark Brackett from Yale University, and it's called the RULER framework. So R stands for recognizing emotions in oneself and others. U stands for understanding emotions, including the causes and consequences of emotions. L stands for labeling emotions, but in a really nuanced way. E stands for expressing emotions, but in a way that fits within the social context and cultural norms. And R stands for regulating emotions. And this is going to be a framework we're going to be using quite a lot within our ELSA sessions. How can schools promote emotional well-being in their pupils? Well, you can have a talk curriculum, and that's partly what ELSA is about. But just as important is the school ethos, as this affects the undercover messages that schools give to children. So we also know from social learning theory that children learn both negative and positive behaviours from those around us. And if we want pupils to be emotionally literate, we have to provide them with excellent role models and the environment in which these skills can be learned. So schools need to focus on their whole school ethos because children learn from the models around them. This means thinking about relationships at every level. So adult to adult, pupil to pupil, and adult to pupil. In addition, young people need to know that they are respected and listened to. They need to be encouraged to find a legitimate voice, and they need to feel valued for who they are and all that they can contribute. This is about promoting self-efficacy, as mentioned earlier when we referred to the work of Bandura. And students need opportunities to be proactive and to have positive experiences. Okay, so let's get really specific now. What sorts of things would you include in an emotional literacy curriculum for the primary years? Well, firstly, there should be a focus on managing emotions. the ability to recognise, understand, label, express and regulate emotions. You might also want to look at building self-esteem and resilience. So many children in our schools experience low self-esteem, especially if they find learning or social relationships difficult. And they may need a little bit of help to recognise their unique strengths and value. Some children may also need support to understand the nuances of social interactions to allow them to engage in relationships in the way that works best for them. Some children may need specific support to develop the kind of skills that enable them to establish and sustain friendships. And unfortunately, some other children have to deal with bereavement or loss, and this is also something that schools can support with. So what about an emotional literacy curriculum for secondary school age pupils? Well, what you want to do is to focus on the same areas that the primary curriculum focuses on, but with a few additions. So you might want to help young people to think about themselves as individuals and how they are different to other people and how that difference can be celebrated. You might want to help young people to think about their role in the future and what they want to do with their lives. You might want to be thinking with them around what their role is as a friend or as a child to mother and father, or what their role might be as a student. You might also want to help them think about how to form and maintain stable relationships, and you might also want to include romantic relationships in that, just to make sure that young people are engaging in safe and supportive relationships. You might want to encourage young people to ask why questions, and there might be an increased focus on maintaining motivation. So in summary, schools need teachers and teaching assistants who can gain the respect of children by the respect that they show, manage their own feelings and behaviours in a really positive way, stay calm in the face of challenges and frustrations, help children through their support and encouragement to dare to be different, see things from the child's perspective, and to make every child know that they count. And these are all essential qualities of ELSAs. For the rest of the video, we're going to start thinking in really practical terms about the kind of activities that ELSAs can do with young people to help them think about managing emotions in schools. So raising emotional awareness is often a really good place for ELSAs to start when working with children. And it's always worth checking out children's ability to recognise, understand and label emotions. Now you can find a ruler checklist in your resource pack that will help you to identify what skills children already have in these areas and what skills they may need to develop. So we need to find out whether children can differentiate between the different feelings they experience, whether they understand what those feelings are communicating, and whether they have an adequate vocabulary to express their emotions. So in terms of recognising emotions in themselves, some key questions we might want to think about before we start planning sessions with young people is, does the child know how they're feeling? Does the child know how they feel in their body when they're worried, happy, angry, sad, etc.? Does the child know what they think, say or do when they're feeling different emotions? Because all of those things are going to help them recognise how they are feeling. So if the child can recognise emotions in themselves, then does he or she also have the capacity to distinguish between the same emotions in other people? So this involves not only recognising facial expressions, but also a person's posture, movements, and their tone of voice. And each of these aspects are potentially areas of focus within ELSA work on emotions. So it's also really helpful for children to develop a really rounded understanding of emotions. So, for example, if you're looking at anxiety, it's helpful for children to understand what are some of the thoughts they might have if they're anxious, how that might feel within their body, and what are some of the behaviours that they might display when they're anxious. It's sometimes helpful to think about metaphor when you're looking at emotions. So, for example, if anxiety was a type of weather, what kind of weather would it be? If anxiety was a type of food, what kind of food would it be? And you can develop this understanding through a wide variety of methods. You could read stories, you can have discussions, you can play games, you can do role play. As an ELSA, you want to make your activities as engaging as you possibly can. You really, really don't want to be relying on worksheets. If you have a look in your resource pack, then there are sheets there that again give you a checklist so you can see what skills your children already have in terms of understanding emotions and what skills they might need to develop. But there are also lots and lots of different suggestions around how you can support children to understand their emotions. So children also need to develop the skill of being able to label emotions using a really nuanced vocabulary. So some children will be able to label basic emotions, for example, happy, sad, worried, angry. But what we want is for children to have a really large vocabulary around emotions. So, for example, to add to those 4 that I've already said, we might want to include shocked, embarrassed, disappointed, disgusted. We also want to help children to develop a vocabulary to show the intensity of the emotion that they feel. So you could be a little bit worried, you could be frightened, you could be absolutely terrified, or you could be in a blind panic. And we want to be able to develop that vocabulary for all of the different emotions that we feel. So happy, sad, worried, and angry are probably the 4 most basic emotions to begin working on. And just as a reminder, it's really important not to talk about bad feelings or good feelings. All feelings are just that, and all feelings are valid. So once the young person you're working with has got a really good understanding of the 4 basic emotions, so that's happy, sad, worried, and angry, you might want to go on to develop their understanding of different emotions. So, for example, lonely, excited, proud, shocked, disgusted, sorry, or embarrassed. So you might be sitting there thinking, well, it's all very well to say that we need to help children to recognise, understand and label their emotions, but how do we actually do it? Well, as I said before, you're going to be using a wide range of activities. You're going to be using games, stories, drawing and other artistic endeavours. You might be doing collaging, making models. You might use puppets or toys. You might be doing drawing or painting. You might use role play. You might encourage the young person to keep a feelings diary. And of course, you're going to be doing lots of discussion. And you might be doing this individually with one child, or depending on your school, you might decide it's appropriate to have a small group. What's going to happen during our ELSA face-to-face sessions is we're going to have an opportunity to share some of the resources that we've all found, so you'll get a really good chance to have a look at things. You'll also be asked to practice or activities and to find resources as part of your homework tasks. So here are just a couple of examples of the kind of resources that you might be using in your ELSA sessions. So we've got a couple of books here. So we've got The Huge Bag of Worries. Lots of you might already be familiar with that. That's an example of a therapeutic story, which we'll be talking about therapeutic stories in Unit 4. We've also got some Mr. Men books there. Again, I'm sure a lot of you know the Mr. Men books, but again, opportunities to help children understand emotions through that. They've got something called the bears, and the bears are their cards, and they show pictures of bears expressing a wide range of emotions, and they can be used in lots and lots of different ways. And then we've also got another set of cards there called a therapeutic treasure deck, of sentence completion and feeling cards. And again, that's got pictures of different feelings, and it's also got sentence completion tasks that you could undertake. So I'm not saying that these are books or resources you should definitely buy, but they're just examples of the sorts of things that you could be using during your ELSA sessions. Great. So we've come to the end of this video, and now we need to think about next steps. What I want you to do is to look through your resource pack at the chapters related to Unit 1. So those are the chapters about general information about ELSA and also working with emotions. The working with emotions chapter covers both content that we've discussed in Unit 1, but also what we'll cover in Unit 4. You don't have to look at them in great detail, but just flick through and see what's in there. Once you've done that, have a look at the target setting and checklist booklet and find the checklist of ruler skills and just take a quick look through that. Once you've done that, what I want you to do is your self-directed learning tasks. So you don't need to send anything in advance of the face-to-face session, but we will be talking about those tasks in the session, so it's really important that you do them. And then I want you to print off your activity book so that you can bring it to our first face-to-face session. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.